These are probably some of the most difficult verses that maybe I need to talk like. How's that now? Is that better? Okay. I can hear myself. Boy, that's a change. In these verses, it's somewhat difficult to really get a grasp on what is Paul saying. And I think I speak for just about everybody in the world. I wish they would have just listed down the things we need to do and what we can't do. Unfortunately, the Bible doesn't do that exactly. It does it in parables, in various different statements and teachings. And it's up to us to discern the message that's in the book. Well, in verse 10, to the married I give this command, not I, but the Lord. So Paul's saying, Jesus has said this, not him. A wife must not separate from her husband, but if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. And a husband must not divorce his wife. Okay, then in verse 12, to the rest I say this, I, not the Lord. So now this is Paul's statement. If any brother has a wife who is not a believer and she is willing to live with him, he must not divorce her. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer and he is willing to live with her, she must not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. Otherwise your children will be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. Seems pretty clear. I wished a lot of the Bible went along like this, that the apostles and the various different prophets, teachers, wherever in the Bible, they had clarified what they were saying. But now we start getting into some more difficult things. In verses 15 down to 17, if an unbeliever leaves, let him do so. A believing man or a woman is not bound in such circumstances. What does it mean not to be bound? Pardon? They're no longer joined. Okay? So they're no longer married. They're not divorced. They're just not bound together in marriage. Okay. Okay, I guess we need to really try to understand. In our culture today, we have to go before a minister, or justice of the peace, a clerk of the court to get legally married because of financial and legal obligation. What was it like back then to be married? How did they get married? Well, pardon? They didn't have a government that issued a license, so how were they married? They stood up before family and friends, declared their love for one another before family, friends, and God, that they were going to be husband and wife. So it's like a couple of weeks ago, I gave an example. I got this woman standing here. Me and her are going to profess our love to one another. We want to end in a marriage. Is that a marriage? Under God's law, under God's eyes. Is it? He doesn't say. After 7 years, yes. They're not married. So you see where it gets difficult and it gets very, very touchy, and everybody's got an opinion. Everybody, whether you're pro or against that idea. I wished it wasn't so. People are going to do that, and they're going to think that way. Like you said, it's not according to the law of the land as we know it today, but in God's eyes, is that a legal marriage? And see, this comes here a little bit later. We are to take the whole counsel of God, not just the parts that we like that support our argument. We're to obey the laws of the land, the laws of the land. But now we got common law. Does that not constitute a law of the land too? In a way, it does, doesn't it? No, I would say in that case, no. You haven't obeyed the laws of the land because in that state they don't recognize that. I mean, every state does its own thing, and there's good and there's bad. I mean, why do people move to Texas and Florida and Nevada? Because of the tax laws. They don't want to pay state income tax. Here in Georgia, we pay state income tax until you turn 65. And then when you turn 65, the first $65,000 of your income is not taxed. And your spouse also gets that $65,000 exemption. Did you know that? When you turn 65, the first $65,000 of your income is not taxed. I called the state tax office when I turned 62 and trying to get a clarification. And she told me and walked me down through the steps. She said, this statement, you subtract $65,000 from your income only. Now over here is your wife's income. Subtract $65,000 from that. Now, there are things like this that exist in just about every state. What do we do? I'm just trying to follow the law. I couldn't understand. It said to do this, and I write this number down here, and then subtract the two, and I always come up with some number less than zero. And I could not understand it. And here I've got a master's in math, and I couldn't understand math. That sort of insulted me. And so that's the reason why I called the state to get a clarification. Now, laws of the land. Are they just? Are they fair? Are they good? Not all of them. And they don't go with God's law. So what do? We obey God's law. And try not to break the state laws. But what do you do in circumstances like this? It's difficult. We try to obey all the laws of the land. But when God's law conflicts, we obey God first. Does that seem reasonable to say and do? So, a believing man or woman is not bound in such circumstances. God has called us to live in peace. How do we know, the wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how will you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? It is possible in that circumstance for one to influence the other through their godly living. Nevertheless, each one should retain the place in life that the Lord assigned to him and to which God has called him. So whatever state you were called when you came to Christ, that's the state you should live in. What is he talking about there? Well, if you tried reading on, this is the rule I lay down in all the churches. Was a man already circumcised when he was called? He should not become uncircumcised. Was a man uncircumcised when he was called? He should not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing. Keeping God's command is all that counts. Each one should remain in the situation which he was in when God called him. Think about that. Whatever situation you were in when God called you, you are to remain in. Were you a slave when you were called? Don't let it trouble you. Although if you gain your freedom, do so. For he who was a slave when he was called by the Lord is Lord's freedmen. Similarly, he who was a free man when he was called is Christ's slave. You were bought at a price. Do not become slaves of men. Brothers, each man, as responsible to God, should remain in the situation God called him to. Sound right? Sound fair? Yeah. Yeah, the Judaizers were doing this. And it's like a couple of weeks ago, I gave the argument, okay, Jesus was a Jew, therefore on the 8th day he was circumcised. So for us to be into Christ, shouldn't us men be circumcised just like Jesus was if we are trying to emulate him? Sounds logical, doesn't it? But this says you don't have to be. Uh-huh. But see, I think what a lot of people do when they try to construct these, and I'm guilty of this. So when you construct a what-if situation, you ignore some facts and keep on going. And by your persuasive argument, you present an argument that sounds logical, sounds believable, and you want to do it. And here's where I think Paul is really helping us in clarifying some things. We don't have to be circumcised or uncircumcised. If we're slaves and free, it makes no difference. We're black or white, it makes no difference. And you know, there are some in the brotherhood that do separate by race. And there's some that do it by sexes. There's classes only for men. And there's classes only for women. Now, what do we do about that? Paul's saying it makes no difference. Whatever situation you're in, remain. It seems pretty clear to me. I don't know. Then we get down to verse 25 down through 29. Now about virgins, I have no command from the Lord, but I give a judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. Because of the present crisis, I think that it's good for you to remain as you are. Are you married? Do not seek a divorce. Are you unmarried? Do not look for a wife. If you do marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. But those who marry will face many troubles in this life, and I want to spare you this. He seems to talk about a lot of different things, and he's given a judgment. This isn't the Lord speaking now. This is him. But being an apostle and having authority, you give a lot of credence to his statements. Continuing on. What I mean, brothers, is that the time is short. For now on those who have wives should live as they had none, those who mourn as they did not, those who are happy as if they were not, those who buy something as if it were not theirs to keep, those who use the things of the world as if not engrossed in them. From this world in its present form is passing away. Paul seems to be building up a case here for the Corinthians, based upon some of the questions they had asked him in the previous letter. It seems to be that there's going to be some turmoil, there's going to be some strife, there's going to be some angst in everybody's life pretty soon. Now, why is he saying if you're not married, don't marry? Paul was unmarried. Now, why would he give us that admonition? Why would he tell us something like that? Yeah. Yes. Very. It was every day. Well, if you've read on through the rest of the chapter, you sort of get Paul's gist. He's sort of warning them. If you're single, who's your devotion to? It's undivided then. It's to God. So your focus is strictly on God and serving Him. What if you're married? You have a divided interest. Yeah. And it's going to be a theme that's sort of underlying a lot of what he's saying. And if we use that in the back of our minds when we read through this, I think it becomes more understandable, less of a mystery to us. Because if we're, what my wife wanted, I tried to go out and get for her. But isn't that true? Now, what about serving God? Well, I got to take care of my wife first. Isn't that the way it goes, guys? Don't we try to please our wives a lot more than what we admit to? Yes. Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. Be circumcised. That's not the way the gospel works. I agree with you 100% in everything you just said. It's very, very difficult. We all are biased. We're all opinionated. We all have our own core beliefs, if you will. And when we should always have one or two songs before we have an opening prayer. We should always have another song before we have an announcement. We should always have one or two more songs before we have our sermon. Then we always have to have an invitation song. Then we have to have another song before the communion. Then we have to have another song before we have our closing prayer. That's the scriptural way to do things, right? No, it's not. It's one way to do it. It's not unscriptural. It's a way to do things. And it's an orderly worship. I would say that you probably go to 95, 99% of the churches of Christ throughout the country, throughout the world, and they would do pretty much the same thing. They have a certain order of worship, so to speak. Now, it's all acceptable worship to God, but why are we here on Sunday morning? To worship God. That right there, the communion. That's the most important thing. And to be with one another of like mind, to help build us up, recharge our batteries to get through the week. Does that sound bad? Does it sound correct? We're here to recharge ourselves, to get revitalized, to be reaffirmed, if you will. That's what we're doing right there. We're coming back in contact with the blood of Christ. That helps us. That builds us up. That helps us all bond together as Christians. Pardon? Obedience. Yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm trying to understand what you said exactly. Since they've been divorced and remarried several times, whatever state they're in right now, stay. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Right. Stay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Cycle. Well, it's just like, what I mentioned a couple of weeks ago and what you alluded to when Jesus confronted the Samaritan woman at the well. She had had 5 husbands, and the man she was with now was not her husband. And when he said that, that convicted her. He knows all about my life. Jesus didn't say anything whether they were scriptural divorces. He didn't say anything that this was an adultery or they just by mutual consent decide to separate. He didn't make any judgment on it. He just made this statement to her. And that convicted her. She went back and told everybody, he knows me. Here's a man that can give you living water. Yeah. So Jesus knows whether she was scripturally divorced or not, but he didn't make mention of it. Isn't that a little bit remarkable there? Corinth, the same thing. I think it supports your argument that whatever state you're in, remain. Don't keep... Reconcile if you can. That is the first step that you should try to do. Reconcile. And then stop it. Break the chain of adultery. But I hesitate to use that word because he doesn't mention that, and I don't want to say it too, and lead you to believe that that's the reason why things are going what they are. We don't know for exact. Then when we get down into verse 32 through 36, I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs, how he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world. How can he please his wife, and his interests are divided? An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world. How can she please her husband? I am saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in the right way in undivided devotion to the Lord. Make sense? Now, because we are cardinal in nature, we do have simple lust, if you will. It's better to be married to take care of those lusts than it is to sin openly. Okay. If anyone thinks he is acting improperly toward the virgin he is engaged to, and if she is getting along in years and he feels he ought to marry, he should do as he wants. He is not sinning. They should get married. But the man who has settled the matter in his own mind, who is under no compulsion but has control over his own will, and who has made up his mind not to marry the virgin, this man also does the right thing. So then he who marries the virgin does right, but he who does not marry her does even better. Seems a little hard, but it's true. Notice Paul's also mentioning the unmarried and the virgin. Unmarried seems to imply then they had been married before. Whereas the virgin word seems to suggest that never having been married. That distinction. So if we keep that in the back of our minds, a woman is bound to her husband as long as he lives. But if her husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but he must belong to the Lord. In my judgment, she is happier if she stays as she is. And I think, too, I have the Spirit of God. Now, those verses. A woman is bound to her husband as long as he lives. But if he dies, she's free, but she has to marry within the Lord. He didn't say anything about the husband, did he? My wife has died. She died about 3 years ago now. I can marry anybody I want. And it doesn't have to be in the Lord, does it? Don't ask that question. This says a woman has to be married within the Lord, doesn't it? Doesn't say anything about the husband. That doesn't sound right. It doesn't pass any rational test. I mean, if Paul is sitting there saying this to the woman, he's also saying it to the man. You know that, and I know that. No, it sure doesn't. But I mean, how many people sit there and look at verses like this and say, hey, I'm free. I can marry anybody I want, a believer or an unbeliever. Whereas you women, you can't. Doesn't pass the sniff test, does it? Yes. You're looking for escape clauses. You're looking for ways to do what you want to do, not what God wants you to do. And there's the problem. We all do that. That's the reason why when I started the class, I was sitting there saying, we all have our opinions. We all have our own ideas, our biases. Good, bad, or indifferent. They're all there. That's what makes us up. That's what makes us all different. That's the reason why we need to be together, to share those ideas, to find out why we do what we do. Then we get down to chapter 8. Now, about food sacrificed to idols, we know that we all possess knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. The man who thinks he knows something does not yet know as he ought to know. But the man who loves God is known by God. Knowledge puffs up. How many in our brotherhood have gone on and got PhDs in divinity, Bible teaching? Yeah, I've got a lot of advanced degrees. That and $1.50 will get you a cup of coffee in most places. It means nothing to nobody except me. It's a personal goal, a personal thing that I did just to satisfy myself. But I can't say that about others. Can you say it about yourself? Knowledge puffs us up. I've got a high opinion of myself. What about you? I think we all do. You have to survive in this world. Now, love builds up. It's nice to have the knowledge, but if you don't have the love, you don't have anything, do you? You have to have that love to reach out to others. If you don't have that, then no amount of knowledge is going to help you. So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols. We know that an idol is nothing at all in the world, and there is no God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came, and from whom we live. And there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came, and through whom we live. There's only one God. There's only one Lord. Now, what does that mean to us? He's talking about this food sacrificed to idols. I know it means nothing. But not everyone knows this. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat such food, they think of it as being sacrificed to an idol. And since their conscience is weak, it is defiled. But food does not bring us near to God. We are no worse if we do not eat, and no better if we do. I can eat that meat offered to an idol. Could you? Pardon? It's just meat. That's all it is. But to a weaker brother or sister who just came out of the world into the brotherhood, so to speak, they have still got ties to their unscriptural ways. And to them, that's food, meat, sacrificed to an idol. That is something hard for them. I can do it free. I have no guilt on that. But I would be causing my brother or sister to sin by me partaking in front of them. So now, here we're at the point where I guess we have to be very careful. Because in verse 9 he says, "Be careful, however, that the exercise of your freedom does not become a stumbling block to the weak. For anyone with a weak conscience sees you who have this knowledge eating in an idol's temple. Wouldn't he be emboldened to eat what was been sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. When you sin against your brothers in this way and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause him to fall." Pretty strong statements, isn't it? Paul's professing to be a vegan. Not really. He's not saying that. But it sounds like it, doesn't it? I will not eat meat again so as not to cause a brother or sister to fall. If. Notice how I'm selectively dropping certain words and saying certain things, trying to present a logical argument to support an idea I might have. I didn't want to get into that quite yet, but that's exactly it. That's exactly right. Paul's telling anybody, any of the brotherhood who feels like his knowledge is so strong, he can do this. But he's also telling the weak brother and sister, you need to read, study, and learn to get stronger so that your knowledge then will allow you to participate like we do. So it's a two-way street there. It's not just to the strong brother who's got the knowledge that he can participate in all this, but it's also to the weak brother or sister. Learn, study, discussing. It's like what we're doing right now. We're trying to learn from one another. I mean, quote unquote, you're calling me the teacher of the class. I'm up here just supervising the discussion, if you will. I'm learning from you too. You cannot deny me my education that I need by not talking. Did you ever think about that? It's the same 4, 5, 6 people that always talk. What about the silent people? Oh, I know. There's a certain structure to it. But, we all think thoughts. We all have ideas. I like to hear myself talk. Right? I like me. Who do you like? Pardon? Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And it might then mean that maybe more study is needed to learn why are you so offended by some of the things I say or do? Because you have a bias, a certain way, you have a certain strength leaning one way or the other. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't know all the answers, but you don't know all the questions. And hopefully you're thinking the same way. You might have some idea that might seem irrelevant to you, but is relevant to what the Bible verses are about. If you share it, it helps everyone. And in some cases, that also helps steer future discussion, future study. You ever think about that? Chuck's sitting there right now. He's writing down a little note. Hey, I can get this sermon. I got to get this sermon. I got to get this one. Don't we all do that in a way? You hear things. I've heard so many different sermons and talks, whatever you want to call these things, from various different brothers in the brotherhood. And some of them I take exception to in a way. But then I study it. Somebody said, okay, wait a minute, I don't quite like that. I don't quite understand it. So I go and study it, study it, study it. Then I come to understand what they're saying. Whether I agree or not is irrelevant. Is it the truth? And that's what we all should be doing. What is the truth? We're all seeking our salvation. We're all seeking our path. We all want to see God. We want to be there. You ever think about what it's like in heaven? I know we have. Have you ever really thought what heaven's going to be like? Jesus said he's gone to prepare a mansion for us, right? He's going to provide us a room. Wait a minute. When I think of room, that's a place where I either go and sit down, lay down, sleep, rest, eat. Why is he preparing me a place for that? I wonder. I don't need a place to sleep because I'm going to be in the presence of my Lord and my God. We're going to sing his praises for eternity. But do you ever think about that? No, we can't. We can't grasp that. That's beyond our simple little mind. That is a truism of the first order. We can't grasp what time is. We can't grasp what heaven and hell is. We can't grasp the realities that we're going to be faced with. This is coming to us. Everyone will face it. How would you like to be standing before God and have everything read about your life? It's going to happen. But the thing is, how bad is that going to be for each one of us? How bad is it going to be for each one of us? I am embarrassed to do that. That he would spend the time necessary to tell me every little thing. And the things he's going to tell me, it's going to embarrass me. We're all scared of embarrassment. We don't like being ashamed of things. But we all do things, don't we? Both the known and the unknown. That scares me. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Inferior. That's it. Yep. Yep. I think that comes back to what Paul's sort of inferring right here is that we all have our bias, we all have our opinions, we all have our beliefs, if you will. And my belief, I'm puffed up because I'm a deacon in the church. You're not. I'm an elder in the church. You're not. I'm better than you. Unfortunately, that does go on. People are like that. I have heard one elder admonish another member in the church when they were teaching a lesson. I'm an elder in the church. I know what I'm saying. I was floored when I heard that. And I think it's just what Chuck was saying right here. We have a tendency to get puffed up about our own self-worth. We got to be careful. No. And it's like it said, regardless of anything you say or do, your knowledge, God, will you be known by God? That becomes the key thing. It's not whether how much you know. Are you known by God? Period. Yeah. Yeah. Special. We, that's interesting you say that because don't we sort of put more emphasis and onus onto those that are preachers' children, elders' children? We do that. Don't we do that? And unfortunately, our kids see us and they sort of bring that on themselves that I'm the preacher's son. You can't talk to me that way. Yes, sir. Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, and I chuckle at that is because our culture has changed so much. I mean, the things we have seen in our lifetimes is just astounding. And unfortunately, the kids have suffered from it. What do we do about it? All we can do, study more and more, be the example to everyone that we can be ready to give the answer for the hope that's within us. That's all we can do. And I know I went over a couple of minutes. Didn't mean to. I thank you for your attention. But please, I mean, if you do have something, please contribute. It's like